Alright guys, we're finally on to our final prismatic speculation. That's going to be all about the hunter. I'm sorry this video took a while to come out, and I really hope you all can still enjoy it. With the information we do know, the hunter does seem that it's going to be very strong when prismatic comes out, and I hope this video can explain why. Alright, jumping into the first build, I think this is probably going to be the most all-around go-to build that most hunters will play with prismatic. Again, just with what information that we do know. Starting off, the main thing with this build is that you're going to be taking combination blow. This just means when you get a melee kill, it will refill your class ability, and you're going to get a stacking melee damage bonus, which is going to be very strong. You can then pair that with your class ability of Gambler's Dodge, so when you dodge, you'll get your melee back, and we all know how this synergy is going to work. You dodge, you get your melee, you melee, you get your dodge, and you can just do this over and over again, stacking that melee damage increase up. Now, what we can pair with this is the fact that we can take things like Winter Shroud now, so when we dodge, we'll create the slowing aura around us, the little burst of slow that comes out, and now you're always going to be slowing enemies to make them even easier to melee, and also just to increase your survivability. Now, what's really cool is that Salus Executioner right here will now proc on any elemental debuff from any class. So if you kill an enemy that is slowed, you will go invisible. If you kill an enemy that's scorched, you will go invisible. Obviously, with this build, pairing it with slow, you're always going to slow enemies. You're always going to go invisible, which is very nice. So now you get a melee kill, you're going to go invisible, just like how Assassin's Cow would normally work, but you don't have to take Assassin's Cow now because you're always going to be slowing with your dodge, and you're always dodging to get your melee back. All these just synergize into each other very well. Now, the other thing you could take is grapple. Grapple does count as melee damage, so I would imagine with combination blow stacks, this will increase your grapple melee damage, and on top of that, this will also unravel, so if you get a grapple kill, you will also go invisible with Salus Executioner. All of this is just going to synergize insanely well, and it gets even stronger once you play into the exotics and fragments. So since we're heavily played into melee, we do know that the exotic Caliban's Hand and that the exotic Syntheseps are going to be on a class item. Now, it's not going to be the super damage for Syntheseps, it's only going to be the melee damage. That's still very good because this should stack with combination blow for even more melee damage. And then you also have Caliban's Hand, so a power melee kill will ignite enemies. So now every single time you get a power melee kill, which you will have all the time, you will ignite enemies, and then every time you get a grapple melee kill, this should also proc with Caliban's Hand, and you will also ignite enemies. So you're going to ignite enemies everywhere with this build. You're going to do a ton of melee damage, and you're also going to be slowing and going invisible every single time you do any of this stuff. Now, fragments to pair with this is going to be things like balance. So when you rapidly defeat enemies with light damage, you get melee energy, and then you rapidly defeat enemies with dark damage, you get grenade energy. Now, the melee energy that comes from dealing damage with light doesn't really matter whatsoever with this, because you will always get your melee and your dodge back with these two paired together. But getting the grenade energy back when dealing dark damage is nice, because when you get kills with grapple, you will get grenade energy back just to refund the grenade itself. And then you could take a dark weapon. I have Quicksilver right here, but just any weapon that would do dark damage. You could even pair Demolicious with this, and then you can rapidly defeat enemies with that to get even more grenade energy. And then we can further play into that by taking Bravery. So we defeat targets with grenades, we'll get volatile rounds, and we defeat targets with a power melee ability, we get unraveling rounds. Now, this is going to be nice because if you take a strain weapon, you're always getting melee kills anyway. So now that strain weapon will just have unraveling rounds to proc balance even more, because you'll have more ad clear, and you're going to be doing more dark damage to get more grapple energy back, to again further play into everything else. Now, we can also take Dawn, so power melee hits will make us radiant. So now every time you get a melee kill, not only you get unraveling rounds, but you're also getting radiant. So now the gun's going to do even more damage. And then you can just take protection, so when you're surrounded by enemies, you're more resistant to incoming damage. And then you even have purpose, so whenever you pick up an overpower, it will grant you either amplified, restoration, frost armor, wolf mail, or overshield based on the super you have equipped. Now, I have 3 supers up here. As you see, I have Gunslinger, I have Silk Strike, and also have Tether. All of these will be fine. Tether will grant an overshield, Gunslinger will grant restoration, and Silk Strike will grant woven mail. Obviously, all those are very strong whenever you pick up an orb. It's just going to depend on whatever circumstance you're in. If you need to do boss damage, obviously take Gunslinger. If you need to add clear, take Silk Strike. And then if you need to debuff enemy, or I guess also crowd control, you can just take Tether. All of these are going to be very strong. And this build, in my opinion, is probably what every single hunter is going to be going for the moment Final Shape comes out. Everything just synergizes together so well, and this is only just the beginning. Once we unlock all the fragments and have all of our class item exotics available to us, I think this build is going to become even stronger, and it is going to be a force to be reckoned with. All right, moving on, this build is going to be heavily focused on super damage. If you want the more all-around build, the previous build is definitely the one for that. But if you just want to make your super do a ton of damage, this is definitely what you want to run. Now we are going to be taking marksman gunslinger, so you can get your 3 shots. You're going to be doing a bunch of damage when you land those precision shots, and we're going to further play into that. We're going to take things like acrobats dodge, so we can make ourselves radiant whenever we use our class ability. Radiant does actually buff the damage of golden gun, so this just means now you'll do even more damage with the golden gun. We're going to take snare bomb, so we can throw this on an enemy to weaken them. So now you're going to have an enemy weakened, you're going to be radiant, and your golden gun's just obviously going to do more damage playing off of both of those. And we're also going to be taking arc bolt grenade. Now this is an interesting one. We're going to jump around a little bit here because we're going to be taking dominance. So this makes your void grenades weaken targets, but your arc grenades jolt targets. So with this, you don't really need the weaken part because snare bomb's already doing that, but you could throw a arc bolt grenade on an enemy to jolt them, then do damage with your super, and you will also do extra damage with that jolt proc. Now we also know that Star Eater Scales is going to be a class item exotic. This is also just a hunter exotic as well, so you can just run this if you want to. But if you take the specific class item, you can pair that with some other stuff. But Star Eaters, whenever you pick an orb up, you're going to get that increased super damage whenever you cast your super. So that's going to be very, very beneficial, again, for more super damage, which is what we're trying to play into. Now, other things to help out with this is things like Threaded Spectre. So whenever you do your dodge, you will create the Strand Clone, which enemies will focus on. You can also take the Winter Shroud. So whenever you dodge as well, you slow enemies around you. The reason I'm kind of taking these two is the fact that you can use your dodge to proc your Radiant to get that increased golden gun damage. But now all the enemies will be slowed and also focusing on a different target. So you have free range just to shoot whatever enemy you're shooting at. So nothing will kill you while you're trying to do your max damage with your golden gun. And even if that wasn't the case, we do know that Stag is going to be a class item exotic. So you use your class ability, you're going to get ×2 resist. So now everything's distracted, everything's slowed, and now you're also even taking reduced damage just so you can accurately land your golden gun shots so you don't miss out on the crazy damage. So kind of the way you would want to do this is dodge to get radiant, then also that will make your Threaded Spectre and proc Winter Shroud and your resistance, so everything will be focused on that stuff, and your tanky. You can then pop your super, and then once your super is popped, throw your melee, throw your grenade to weaken and jolt enemies, and now you have radiant, you have everything else focused on other stuff. Then you can easily get your 3 shots off just to do an insane amount of damage because you will have Star Eaters procced as well. Now to help keep this build flowing, we're also going to take balance. So again, whenever we do light damage, we get melee energy. Whenever we do dark damage, we get grenade energy. This is going to be nice because you can take something like the new Forbearance, which comes with demo and its origin trait. So you're going to get a bunch of grenade energy back when you get a kill with this, but also since it's light damage, you're getting multi-kills with it. You're also going to be getting your melee energy. So this one weapon alone right here will be able to refill both your melee and grenade, so you can keep that flowing. Now you can also take hope whenever you have an elemental buff, your class ability regenerate more quickly. This just means things like amplify, restoration, frost armor, wolf mail, overshield, all of this will proc hope. And then obviously we're going to be taking purpose, so whenever we pick an orb up, we will get one of these things. With solar, we are going to be focused on restoration, which is obviously very, very strong, so you're going to have restoration all the time. Whenever you get radiant, you will also proc hope, so you can literally use your class ability and then you will further get your class ability back, which is very, very nice. And then we'll also be taking protection again, so whenever surrounded by enemies, we're more resistant to incoming damage. And this just means now you can use your super whenever you're surrounded, because everything else is also giving you damage reduction, taking the aggro off of you. And now again, you're just going to be able to obliterate anything with your golden gun. I'm not sure how strong the setup's going to be. It's really just going to depend on how much damage the super can do, but I think overall this is a fun build to try out. I just think the first one again is going to be the better all-around build. Now the next 2 builds are just going to be kind of fun builds. This is heavily going to be focused on Threaded Spike or even Withering Blade. Both of these melees will have the ability to kill multiple enemies at once, with Threaded Spike being able to just travel around and kill an enemy, while Withering Blade can just ricochet and kill a bunch of enemies. Both will be very strong depending on however you want to do it. And I'm going to be taking Gambler's Dodge just so I can refill the melee whenever I need to, which is going to be nice because again, that's what this whole build is going to play into. Now we're also going to be taking things like Caliban's Hand again, so whenever we get a melee kill, we will ignite an enemy. This should be able to proc multiple ignites since the melee is technically killing multiple enemies, so you could just cause a bunch of explosions. Now we can also even take things like Heart of Endless Light, which we know will be a class item exotic. This could potentially give us more ability damage to easily secure those one-shot kills, but it could also give us more ability cooldown. We don't exactly know which one it's going to be. Both will be very, very strong, just so we can spam these more, or just so they easily can kill more. Now I'm also going to be playing into Stylus Executioner, so I can go invisible whenever I get a melee kill as well. Threaded Spike will sever enemies, and Withering Blade will slow enemies, so every time you get a melee melee kill, you're now also going invisible. And we're also going to be taking gunpowder gamble. Now, since our melees can kill multiple enemies, this should be able to stack up extremely fast. So we just have a very strong grenade, because our other grenade is just going to be grapple again. This is nice for your grapple melee and just getting around. Again, you will go invisible with this, and you should be able to proc ignitions off of it. But now you just also have another alternative to throw a grenade if you need to, and we'll further play into that with things like ruin. So this will increase the size and burst damage with stasis crystals, but also the main thing is it will increase the size of solar ignition. So since you can ignite enemies with your melee, your grapple, and gunpowder's gamble will also ignite, you should be able to increase the size of all that just to add clear even more with this setup. Now we're also going to be taking grace, so whenever you deal damage with a kinetic weapon, we will get bonus transcendence energy. The reason we're taking this is because we're going to be taking Monte Carlo. This is obviously a kinetic weapon, but this will also heavily play into getting our melee energy back, so we can throw as many threaded spikes and withering blades out as much as we want. And we're also going to be taking hope, so we have an elements buff. Our class ability generates more quickly. This is very nice because we're always going to go invisible. That will count as a class ability buff, so we can get our gambler's dodge back even more often, so we can throw our melee even more often. Now protection, so again, while we're surrounded by enemies or more resistant incoming damage, this is pretty much going to be a staple in every single build. And then we're also going to be taking purpose, so once again, when you pick an orb up, you're going to get all the good stuff. But since we are taking silk strike, we will get woven mail, which is going to be a permanent 45% damage reduction, and this will also let you keep hope up even more often, just so you can always have your class ability cool it down faster. So once again, the whole goal of this build is to throw your melees out a lot, proc ignites with Caliban's hand. You can get gunpowder gamble stacked up to proc ignites with that. Even grapple can ignite. You're going to go invisible all the time. You're always going to have woven mail all the time. And even things like Monte Carlo will fill your transcendence energy up. It's going to get your melee back. You're going to have more ability damage or ability cooldown, just depending. You want to spam all your abilities anyway. And you even have things like silk strike to add clear. And if silk strike can proc Caliban's hand, since it does technically count as a power melee kill with its basic attack, maybe that could be even stronger for add clear. We'll just have to wait and see if that synergizes. I don't think it will, but if it does, that's just the cherry on top, and I think this build could be a ton of fun. And moving on to the final build, don't worry, for all of you that was interested in the new aspect Ascension, I got you. This build's gonna be heavily based around that. Now this obviously isn't the image for it, but just imagine this is new Ascension aspect, so you can just twirl up in the air with your arc staff. We're gonna be pairing this with things like Winter Shroud, so theoretically whenever we use Ascension, we should be able to slow the enemies beneath us while also jolting enemies with Ascension. So we can slow and jolt with these two abilities. Theoretically, that's how it should work, and this is going to be the whole goal of this build. We're going to be taking things like marksman dodge, because this does have the lowest dodge cooldown, so we can just spam this even more often. And my whole thought process with this is that I'm also going to be taking snare bomb. So with this, you can run into a group of enemies, you can even grapple into a group of enemies, which is why I have that selected. You can pop your Ascension to jolt slow enemies, and while you're up in the air, you can throw your snare bomb down kind of like a grenade to weaken all the enemies. You're also blind them as well, so they're literally not going to be able to move between snare bomb and your slow. And this should also proc the jolt that Ascension makes. Now everything is going to be weakened, slowed, and jolted, and since you proc the jolt, that should be able to kill everything that's below you. Now obviously that sounds very fun, but you do have to keep the uptime of that up a lot to make it viable, and that's why we're going to be playing into things like 6 Coyote, because we know this will be a class item focused exotic, so we'll get 2 dodges, so we can proc 2 Ascensions, and we can also take things like the Stag, so when we use our class ability, we'll get that ×2 resist, so now you're going to be even tankier while you're in there with all those enemies. We can even take a weapon with classy contender, so whenever we get kills, we refill our class ability so we can use it even more. And then pairing that with something like the title, we can take balance, so whenever we defeat targets with light damage, we get melee energy back. So now the title should be able to grant a snare bomb back, alongside also granting us class ability for Ascension, so you can keep doing the combo of Ascension, slow, and weaken. Now we also going to be taking Dawn, so power melee hits will make us radiant. Since this counts as a power melee, we should also be able to get radiant off this to make our title do even more damage, to again keep that combo going. And also hope, so we have an elemental buff, our class ability regenerates more quickly. Since snare bomb will be able to give us radiant, we'll keep hope up a lot, but Ascension will also make us amplify, which will also keep hope up a lot. And we're also going to be taking purpose, so when we pick up an overpower, again we'll get everything. And then also protection, so when we're surrounded by enemies, we get that damage reduction. Now for your super, silk strike's fine because you will get woven mail. Teller again, it's also good because you get an overshield. Gunslinger's good for restoration, just depending on whatever you want, kind of like the first build. But overall, I think this build could be a ton of fun. I don't know how viable it's going to be, and I definitely don't think it's going to be as strong as some something like the first build. This is definitely leaning into more of just a fun setup route, which I think is very cool that you can do things like this. But I really don't know if you're going to be able to take this build at something like a day one rate. We'll just have to wait and see, because if there's some other fragments, there's some other class item exotics that can make this work, or even just new perks, this build could potentially be very, very strong and definitely a ton of fun. But all right, that is going to do it all for my prismatic speculation on the hunter. Let me know what you all think about the builds. Also, if you have any ideas, be sure to drop them down below as well. I'm very excited to see the full potential once we have everything unlocked, and I seriously think the first build I went over will probably be one of the best hunter builds in the game, even with us not knowing all the information about prismatic. Anyways, though, that's going to do it all for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you all have a great day. Peace.